Hey there. Welcome back to Karen Strikes Again, where calm communities turn into battlefields and peace is just a brief intermission between episodes of pure chaos. If you saw the last story, you know what happened. Karen, clipboard in hand, sunglasses at dawn, led a full-scale invasion of my backyard to build a community garden without my consent. She brought in contractors, cut the lock on my fence, and acted like she owned the block. But after the police showed up and I made it clear I wasn't playing nice anymore, I thought it was over. Spoiler alert. It wasn't. A few days passed in silence. No weird notes. No Facebook posts. No sightings of her marching up and down the street like a hall monitor. I even started to think maybe, just maybe, Karen had learned her lesson. And then I got a letter from the HOA, a formal notice accusing me of aggressive behavior, of threatening a fellow resident, and, get this, of disrupting community harmony. That's right. Karen, who trespassed on my property, who cut my gate lock, who ignored multiple warnings or weed, was now playing the victim, and the worst part, the HOA seemed to believe her. So, buckle up, because this time, Karen's not just being entitled, she's being dangerous, and I'm about to show her what happens when you try to weaponize the system against the wrong guy. I stood in my kitchen, rereading the letter from the HOA for what felt like the 10th time. It has come to our attention that a complaint has been filed regarding an incident of hostile behavior directed at a fellow community member. As such, we are opening an investigation into this matter and ask for your written response within 7 days. Hostile behavior? I hadn't yelled. I hadn't threatened anyone. I had called the police after someone trespassed onto my property and started construction without my permission. That's not hostility. That's called being a responsible adult. But it didn't take a genius to figure out who filed the complaint. Karen, apparently, she was now flipping the script, painting herself as a concerned, community-loving resident, traumatized by my aggressive reaction. I could almost hear her voice as I imagined the phone call. He was shouting. I felt unsafe. He called the police on me, just for trying to bring people together. Forget HOA guidelines. This woman was working off a full-blown Karen playbook. But what really got me? The HOA was entertaining it. Not only did they send me the letter, but I also received an invitation to a conflict resolution session. One of those painfully awkward meetings where you sit in a folding chair under fluorescent lights and pretend like any of this is normal. Fine, if they wanted a meeting, I'd bring my notes, my photos, my ring footage, my police report. Hell, I'd bring the broken lock if I had to. But first, I needed to know what else Karen was up to, so I started talking to the neighbors, not the ones who nodded politely and walked inside, the ones who'd been around longer, the ones who'd probably had a run-in with Karen before, and boy, did they talk. She once called the city because we painted our shutters red, one woman told me. Said it was visual pollution. Karen gave my son a written warning for riding his scooter on the sidewalk, another man said. She printed it out, signed it, like she was the actual government. One neighbor laughed and told me Karen had tried to ban inflatable Halloween decorations because they made the street look cluttered. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about me. This wasn't about a garden. This was about control. Karen thrived when people were too polite to push back, when neighbors ignored her flyers and gave tight-lipped smiles to avoid confrontation. That's how she'd been running the neighborhood for years. Not officially, but loudly. But now I had challenged her authority. Publicly. Legally. And, worst of all, I had won. So now she was doing what Karens do best, playing the victim while plotting revenge. I wasn't afraid of a little HOA hearing. I had truth on my side and more evidence than she could ever fake, but deep down, I knew this wasn't her final move. Karen was smart, in that sneaky, manipulative way that made you second-guess your own sanity, and if she was willing to weaponize the HOA, then I needed to be ready for whatever came next, because something told me the real fight hadn't even started yet. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening in the community clubhouse, the same place we hosted potlucks and craft nights. Now, it felt like a courtroom. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed like I was heading into a deposition. Clean shirt, neatly stacked folder under my arm, flash drive loaded with ring footage in my pocket. When I walked in, Karen was already there. She was seated at the front table next to the HOA president, legs crossed, lips pursed in a perfect mixture of smug and wounded. Her sunglasses were perched on top of her head, her hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked like it hurt. There were maybe 10 people seated in the audience, a mix of curious neighbors and board members. Some nodded politely when I walked in. Others avoided eye contact. I didn't blame them. No one wants to be in the middle of a suburban turf war. The HOA president, Mark, cleared his throat. Thank you for coming, everyone. Tonight we're here to address a complaint submitted regarding an incident between 2 residents. He launched into the formalities, reading from a piece of paper, like this was a courtroom drama and he was trying to win an Emmy. Then Karen got her turn. She stood up and clutched her statement like she was delivering a eulogy. I never meant for any of this to become a conflict, she said, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. I was simply trying to enrich our neighborhood through a small, community-driven project. Instead, I was met with hostility, aggression, intimidation. I feared for my safety. She even dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue. A tissue? Straight out of the Karen playbook. I was publicly shamed, she continued. Filmed without consent. Misrepresented online. I'm not a villain. I'm a volunteer. For a second, I scanned the room. Some of the board members looked concerned. 1 or 2 neighbors whispered to each other. I stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and laid my folder on the table. I'd like to respond, I said calmly, and I brought proof. I started with the facts, the broken gate lock, the trespassing footage, the photos of the construction materials, the police report, the HOA emails, or lack thereof, proving I was never officially informed. Then I played the footage. The screen behind me lit up with the Ring camera's angle, Karen waving at the workers, walking confidently into my yard, clipboard in hand. The room was dead silent. When the clip ended, I turned back to the room. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I recorded everything. And when someone breaks into your property and acts like they have the legal right to it, calling the police isn't hostility, it's common sense. Karen shifted in her chair. Mark leaned forward. Karen, were you aware that the gate was locked? She hesitated. I assumed it was an accident. It's an easement area, technically. That section borders the community green space. Another board member chimed in. Even if it does, it doesn't override private property rights. We don't have legal access without written consent. Karen opened her mouth, then shut it again. Another neighbor stood up. Just for the record, I've lived next to him for months. He's never been aggressive. I didn't even know his voice until now. A small ripple of laughter broke the tension. I didn't smile. I just looked at Karen, because this wasn't about winning the room. It was about sending a message. She wanted to play the victim. She wanted to weaponize the HOA. But facts? Facts don't cry. At the end of the meeting, Mark nodded and said, "We'll review everything and follow up with a formal conclusion." But based on what we've seen tonight, I believe the matter speaks for itself. Karen gathered her things quickly, her jaw set tight. She didn't make eye contact as she left the room, but I caught something, just a flicker, as she passed. Me fear, not because I was dangerous, because she knew I wasn't backing down. For a few days after the HOA meeting, it was blissfully quiet. No notes, no letters, no Karen. My wife even joked that we'd finally uninstalled Karen 1.0 from the system. But I knew better. People like her don't give up. They adapt, and just when I started to let my guard down, the weirdness began. It started small. A trash can tipped over. Sprinklers mysteriously turned on at night. Our mailbox left open after delivery every single day. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe wind, maybe a forgetful mailman, but it kept happening, and only to us. Then came the reviews. I own a small local landscaping business, been running it for years, clean reputation, loyal clients, 5-star reviews across the board, until suddenly 3 1-star reviews appeared in the same week. Owner was rude and aggressive, not safe to be around. Terrible service, will never use again. Unprofessional, yelled at my children. None of them were clients, none of them even made sense. I flagged them, reported them. But the damage was already done. New clients were hesitating. One even cancelled a quote appointment citing concerns. And just like that, it was clear Karen was taking the fight online. When public confrontation didn't work, she went covert, but she didn't stop there. The next Sunday, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a child services investigator. Apparently someone had filed a report, anonymously, claiming we left our dog outside in extreme heat without water. Said there were concerns for neighborhood pets. We don't even have a dog. The investigator was polite but firm. We're obligated to follow up. Do you have any pets? No, I said flatly. Not even a goldfish. She paused. Well, your name came up. I'm sorry. This kind of thing does happen sometimes. False reports. Retaliation disguised as concern. I asked if the complaint had a name. She said no, I didn't need one. At this point, Karen wasn't just trying to annoy me. She was trying to ruin me, socially, financially, legally, and that's when I decided if she wanted a war, I'd give her one, but not on her terms, not petty, not sneaky. I was going to play smart. Step 1, I set up new motion-activated cameras facing the street, the mailbox, and my front yard. Ones that uploaded directly to the cloud, no SD cards to steal, no excuses. Step 2, I reached out to a friend in IT, and we started tracking the fake reviews. Their IPs, login patterns, anything we could connect to Karen or her network. Step 3, I scheduled a follow-up meeting with the HOA, this time not to defend myself, but to file my own complaint. A formal one. Harassment, defamation, false reporting, with time-stamped photos, with audio clips, with digital footprints. I wasn't just fighting back, I was building a case. And maybe, just maybe, that's what scared Karen the most, because deep down, under all the attitude and fake smiles, Karen had always relied on one thing, that people would stay quiet, that no one would call her out, that neighbors would rather avoid drama than confront it. But not this time. I wasn't just confronting her, I was documenting her. And that meant one thing. Next time she slipped up, I'd have everything I needed to end this permanently. They say the devil is in the details. In Karen's case, It was in the metadata I had spent the last week quietly collecting evidence. Camera footage, timestamps, tracking IPs tied to the fake reviews. Most of it was circumstantial, hard to pin directly to her, until she made a mistake. One morning, while checking my business email, I noticed something odd. A contact form submission from my website. It wasn't unusual. I get a few each week. But this one caught my attention because it was filled with vague insults instead of a real inquiry. You shouldn't be around kids. Hope someone reports your shady business. Your wife should be ashamed. No name, no real question, just bile. I opened the email headers. My IT friend had shown me how. The sender used a burner Gmail account, but the IP... It traced back to a residential block only 3 streets away. Guess who lives there? Even better, the account had been used just hours before to leave a new 1-star review on a local forum. Again, targeting my business. Same writing style, same tone, same patterns. That was strike 1. Strike 2 came from my mailbox camera. Late one night, a motion alert pinged my phone. I checked the live feed, and there it was, a woman in a hoodie walking up my driveway. She slipped something into my mailbox and walked away. I zoomed in on the footage. The angle wasn't perfect, but the gait, the build, the high ponytail. It was Karen. The next morning, I found a folded note inside. You think you're smart. You're not. You might have won 1 round, but this isn't over. You've made enemies. No signature. But the penmanship. Exactly like the cursive on the first HOA complaint. I didn't even feel angry. I felt excited, because that was strike 3. I now had an IP address connecting her to harassment. Surveillance footage of her approaching my mailbox at night. A handwritten threat. I compiled everything and called my lawyer. He took one look at the evidence and said, "You've got her. It's time to stop playing defense." So we drafted a formal cease and desist letter, this time with teeth. Included were the video stills, a timeline of harassment, screenshots of the reviews, and technical proof from the email trace. The letter made it crystal clear. If Karen continued her behavior, we would pursue civil action for defamation, harassment, interference with business, criminal trespass, and because she used HOA channels and posed as a community representative, we included fraudulent misrepresentation in the packet too. I printed 2 copies, one for my records and one to deliver in person. Now I didn't want to fight. I wanted her gone, done, over. But as I walked up her driveway, envelope in hand, I saw her peek through the blinds. She didn't open the door. I knocked once, calmly. No answer, so I slid the letter into her doorframe and turned around. Behind me, I heard her voice. Small, shaken. "You're making a mistake." I paused, but didn't turn back. "No, Karen," I said. "You did. Over and over again. And now there are consequences." She didn't reply. I walked home feeling lighter than I had in weeks, because this time, the game wasn't in her hands anymore. It was in mine. After the cease and desist letter was delivered, the silence was unsettling. No more mailbox notes, no fake reviews, no odd coincidences with trash cans or sprinklers. Karen disappeared. I didn't see her watering her lawn, didn't hear her clacking heels on the sidewalk during her morning inspection walks. Not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the message. But this wasn't relief. It was the calm before a storm. The kind of silence that doesn't settle. It simmers. Still, I took the win for what it was. My business reviews slowly recovered after I reached out to the platform with documentation. Neighbors I barely spoke to before started greeting me more openly. Greg, the retired cop down the street, stopped by one afternoon just to say, "You handled that better than most would have." Even the HOA, which had once questioned my aggressiveness, issued a quiet apology via email, saying the complaint file had been resolved with no action taken. No action. Because the evidence didn't lie, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe just leftover stress, but every time I pulled into my driveway, I caught myself glancing at Karen's house. Blinds closed. No movement until one evening. It was nearly 10 p.m. I was taking out the trash when I noticed a flicker of light across the street, her porch light, blinking on and off. Then it stopped. Weird. But I shrugged it off and went back inside. Later that night, my wife handed me an envelope. It had been slid under the door. No stamp. No name, just 2 words handwritten in bold marker. Be ready. I didn't react immediately. Just stared at it, heart thudding in my chest. Because if Karen had gone quiet for a while, this was her whisper in the dark. Not a scream, not a bang, just a quiet threat. And somehow, that made it worse. She wasn't retreating. She was reloading. So I took that envelope, scanned it, filed it with the rest, and locked it in my growing folder titled Karen Evidence. If she thought this was over, she was wrong. This wasn't the end, it was the intermission. And when she came back, I'd be ready. If there's one thing I've learned from this entire experience, it's this. Karen doesn't always knock on your door screaming. Sometimes she whispers. Sometimes she hides behind rules, fake smiles, and anonymous complaints. But make no mistake, she's still there. When this started, I thought I was dealing with a pushy neighbor. Then it turned into trespassing, then lies. Then a full-on smear campaign, and just when I thought I'd fought back hard enough to make her stop, she changed tactics. That's the real danger. Karen isn't just entitled, she's persistent. She plays the long game, but here's the thing. So can I. I used to think silence meant peace. Now I know. Sometimes silence just means your opponent is plotting. That's why I've documented everything. I've backed up footage, stored emails, kept physical notes in a folder labeled with her name. Because if she ever tries anything again, I won't just be ready to defend myself. I'll be ready to finish this. This isn't paranoia, it's preparation. And the truth is, I don't want war. I just want to live in my house, in peace. But if Karen decides to strike again, this time I'll strike back harder. So, here we are. After all the letters, lies, reviews, threats, Karen has gone quiet. But if you've made it this far, you know what that really means. She's not done. Not even close. This isn't just about property lines or flower beds. It's about power, control, and ego. And when someone like Karen loses those things, they don't walk away. They reload. But the difference now? I'm not just hoping she'll stop. I'm prepared for when she won't. I've got eyes on the street, receipts in the cloud, and a growing list of neighbors who've had enough. Because this time, it's not just me she's messing with. And if Karen thought she could manipulate everyone into silence, well, she's about to find out just how loud the truth can be. Thanks for sticking with me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a neighbor like Karen? Because trust me, she strikes again.